Greetings, everyone. This is Caroline Staten with Transition US, and I wanted to welcome you all to our teleseminar today. This one is on time banks and transition, movements moving together. And let me give you some logistical information before we dive in. First off, our principal aim in offering these teleseminars is to provide practical support to the leaders of transition initiatives and to those who are mulling over starting an initiative, and community leaders working on resilience building within their communities in whatever capacity that may be. And we do want to continue to offer the webinars at no cost, but do ask that you consider making a donation to transitionus.org. And thank you so much in advance to those of you who are able to do this. Now let me get right into our event today, Time Banks and Transition, and introduce our guests, Linda Hogan and Terry Daniels. They're founders of hOurworld, which is you'll hear a lot more about. They're joining us today to really talk about a different way of developing a local economy. And hOurworld is a network of 116 time banks across the U.S. so far, with more than 10,000 members and more than 600,000 hours of service. So you'll hear in this webinar lots of information about the history of time banking, various models, structures, funding mechanism, resources, how to get it started, some of the challenges, and some of the opportunities. So all that follows. So I wanted to say a little bit about Linda and Terry. Linda Hogan is a social architect and storyteller who was raised in a large family in small rural college town in New Hampshire, where the creation and practice of community currency was a valued norm. So she really has this in her DNA. Relationships, the true social security, are her definition of wealth, and exchanging time with others is her authentic lifestyle. Linda has been a nonprofit administrator, community organizer, and social architect working in communities in New Hampshire and Maine for over 30 years. So we're really happy to have Linda with us today, again, founding member of hOurworld. And wanted to also introduce Terry Daniels, who's a community co-op developer, and he combines entrepreneurial leadership skills practiced and honed as owner-operator of several businesses with particular interest and experience in community-based economics. Community co-ops allow members to earn and spend time credits through group projects. They create exchange opportunities that normally do not happen in traditional member-to-member exchanges. Community co-ops can also be a source of funding for the exchange via grants or projects performed in the cash economy. So Terry has helped create 2 community co-ops, Our Exchanges, the Portland Step 1 Weatherization, and Long Island Home Enterprise, a housing renovation cooperative. So these are the 2 folks with us today, and want to turn it over to you, Linda and Terry, and take it away. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you, Carolyn. So I'll take it from the top. We'll just call out the pages or the page numbers as we move through if you have the presentation in front of you. So hOurworld, we're a worker-owned cooperative. There's 3 members, or social architects as we call ourselves, that have created this cooperative that gives away free time banking software. We do consulting for startup time banks or service exchanges. We use those words interchangeably. And we do trainings. That's our revenue model, is to do trainings, what we call immersion trainings. And Linda's our lead trainer in that, and Stephen, on slide 2, you'll see a little bit about us, the founders. Stephen's our software developer, and we all come out of Portland, Maine. We've been with a time bank there that's been around since 1996. It's one of the strongest ones in the country. and Portland would receive requests for training in its software, and we just decided to create this co-op to help support the national. And now there's some time banks that are using our software abroad as well. So our driving motivations for hOurworld, and I'm on slide 3, is to reduce the barriers of time banking. There's lots of community activists and organizers across the country, and their challenges with software, community organizing, forming institutions that are sustainable and long, are able to work for a long period of time. These are challenges that this movement has, and we support that with all 3 tools, the software training and consulting. We see what we call sister movements, buy local movements, transition movements, Granges. There's lots of different kind of community organizing, grassroots organizations that we see as potential partners. If we work together, we can change the ecology and economy of this country. Our third principle is watering the roots. If we ever do derive revenue on a substantial way from the software side of us, that 75% of the revenues made in hOurworld will water the roots of the movement and support the local time bank coordinators. So right now in our network, it's 123 exchanges now, and there's about 375 to 400 organizers, I just was told recently, community organizers, and they're doing a lot of the legwork and the grunt work, and we're just here to support them. So on slide 4, we start a little bit about the history. What we found out on our walkabout, so as Lynn and I and Stephen started hOurworld, we decided to get on the road and visit other time banks and reduce what we call our Portland bias, because that's what we know well, and find out how other time banks ran themselves. And some of them aren't around anymore, and we spoke to their leaders. Some of them are been thriving, and some of them have been struggling. We just wanted to hear their stories and gather their stories. And one of the things we found out along the way was that there were these things, they didn't call themselves time banks, but they were self-help exchanges in the 1930s during the Great Depression as money literally dried up. One of the stories that we heard was in L.A., someone who was out of work and his family was starving decided to go out to the farms at that time in L.A. and do an exchange with a farmer. And the farmer said, well, nobody's picking the fruit. You can repair my barn and get as much of that stuff on the trees as you'd like. And he went back to his community, and everybody said, where'd you get that? And this beginning of the equality currency in the U.S. Started happening as self-help cooperatives, as self-help exchanges. As it turns out, there were thousands of these until the New Deal legislation kind of changed the game a bit for the self-help cooperatives. But it's an example for us of what's possible. So I'll hand it off to Linda on slide 5.
Very cool. Thank you. So time banking is a name that's internationally recognized for this movement. It's also called service exchanges. Sometimes people call them time share and time trades. Hours, we call them hour exchange. And the play on words there is not only is it our, H-O-U-R, but it's our O-U-R, because we believe we're all one world family, and this is a great way to be equal and to value each other equally and respectfully, is by recognizing the gifts in each one of us. And that goes back to the very first time bank, which is an amazing story. A woman named Teruko Mitsushima was a housewife born in 1920. She became a housewife, obviously, after 1920. But during World War II, she was a young mother with 2 babies. Her house was burned to the ground. Her parents' house was burned to the ground. And her husband, who was a soldier, was MIA. So she was standing there literally being starved as the Alliance was starving out the country. And she didn't know how she was going to feed her children or what she was going to do. Fortunately, she was an incredible seamstress. And so as a seamstress, she was able to exchange that service for vegetables and fruits from her neighbors. And she learned from that moment, she said, there's something to this. And then the country, of course, had to deal with malnutrition and pride, and how are they going to have a national pride again? How are they all going to survive this financially, emotionally, spiritually? So for the next 20 years, she kept thinking about this all the time. And then amazingly, in 1973, she decided to launch what she called the first time bank. And it's interesting that she called it a time bank, but she also called it a volunteer labor of love bank, or the love and labor bank. And what she wanted to do was to make sure that seniors could age in place in their homes. And her thoughts about equality and reciprocity were, if people needed services when they could provide services when they were younger, they could receive services back when they were older. And because the country had aged fast because of the devastation of the war, she saw that as a very relevant issue. She was so one person doing this that she went around and talked to her friends, began this in Osaka, and years later there were 4,000 exchanges from 1973 to 1996, which is quite incredible. There's about 1,000 there now. She introduced it as a point system for reciprocity. You do one service for 1 hour, that equals 1 point. The part that we like the best is she actually predicted, and she wrote 4 books, but she predicted that there would be a change in value system of currency, away from the monetary system and back into caring about each other. She's not well known. She became known, or is becoming known now, because a woman named Jill Miller, who's an Australian, just did her thesis called Pioneer Trader in Time as a Currency. And she worked on her doctorate about community currency. She went to Japan. She met Takura's family and other members of the exchange and said, wow, this story needs to be told. So we love the story, and we're telling it, and we hope you will too. On the next slide, number 6, you'll see that in the United States, the very first service exchange, and they called themselves a service exchange, was in Grace Hill Settlement House in St. Louis, Missouri. And this came out of the war out of poverty of the 60s, when Lyndon Johnson was able to push through a lot of Kennedy's plans, and we all know many programs started, including community action agencies. There was a call to resolve poverty. And Grace Hill Settlement House had immigrants and refugees and people who were intergenerationally poor living there. And they got together with a very wise and thoughtful leaders, 3 administrators, who believed that the answers were really within the community, that it would be helpful and to get money from the federal government and to get other supports, grants, any systems that they could put in place with any of the cash economy. But they also knew that the people that were there were rich in ideas and creativity. So they really just said, what do you want to do? How can we help you? How can you help yourself? And the story goes, the first service exchange, which they named as a service exchange, was created at a kitchen table by mostly women mothers who sat down on back of a piece of paper or a napkin, wrote out what they called the guiding principles. And their guiding principles were, we're all equal. You have to give and receive for reciprocity. We have to trust each other. And my favorite one, we are each precious. So everyone believed in that. And then they walked around with much greater self-esteem. And they took, again, on pieces of paper, okay, I will babysit your child for 2 hours so I get 2 time credits. And they kept the slips in place. And then that person could go somewhere else and say, okay, I need my car repaired. I have 2 time credits. Can you repair my car? This program was so prolific all through the 1970s as a service exchange with what they called their guiding principles that it grew into all 4 of the chapters of the settlement house. There are 4 different neighborhoods in St. Louis. And they engaged a vast majority of the people there. They even birthed what they called a neighborhood university, where they said to people, okay, can you teach me how to change a flat and oil in my car? That would be valuable. Can you teach me first aid for my child? That would be valuable. Can you teach me to cut hair? So they were doing it themselves. And 1979 came along, and it was very informal, but well-running for now 7 or 8 years. Carter was president, and in 1980, as we all remember, Reagan was elected president. And when he came into office, federal funding dried up dramatically and quickly. And they went from many $100,000 grant to a $20,000 grant. And that's when they decided to formalize the program, really call it a service exchange, and start recording the hours differently. And from there, it evolved into time dollar, and from there into time banking, which it became known as more commonly in 1986. The next picture is a picture of a guy with a car, and you're probably wondering what that's all about, but this is a legitimate picture of a man in Santa Fe, New Mexico, who was working on a car that was purchased for time, for hours, here in Portland, Maine, and driven cross country to New Mexico by a woman who left our service exchange here in Portland and helped found one in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So she had the car, purchased the car, had it fixed, and drove it across, and then has had it repaired, and she's still got it, and this is 10 years later, which is pretty cool. She also kind of works us into both energy and consciousness, the fact that we're all one country, and leads into what Terry and I call our walkabouts of us traveling across the country to meet cool people doing these wonderful things, whether they call them service exchanges or time banks or something else, to find out what the community currency world was in our country. So weatherization here.
So Carolyn mentioned at the beginning of the call the community co-op concept, which basically a community co-op can be a project or it can be a business, and it's where people can earn time credits and spend time credits in the operation of this organization. They can also use cash as well. But the Step 1 weatherization program in Portland, Maine was, and this is typical for time banks and I think typical for transition movements as well, an impulse around the need to, the oil crisis basically of a couple of years ago where prices were through the roof in Maine. The houses are what we say old and cold, and the community basically of the time bank itself, some members just said, we want to start weatherizing our neighbors' houses. One of the men in the community just came forward and offered to donate a bunch of materials to the time bank. And we took that and leveraged a little bit further to say, let's start a community co-op around weatherization where members can earn time dollars and spend time dollars as green teams weatherizing their neighbors' houses. And anybody in the time bank could spend their time dollars for simple Step 1 weatherization, caulking, blowing in some insulation, putting the plastic around the windows, that sort of thing. And what was really amazing, the intellectual capital of a few people was leveraged in this community co-op, and we had all sorts of folks participating. And it's just a mind shift about the way we can do community or the way we can do economy, and in this situation, how it can help ecology. But this model of community time, this sort of barn-raising approach around one project or around a business, utilizing time dollars, I think is just tremendously inspiring to look at what we have, our skills and our time, and leverage it for what it is we need to do as a community.
Absolutely. The other thing that is really important here is most time banks struggle with how they can be sustainable financially. Everyone understands community currency, but how do you keep the lights on in an office, and how do you pay for a coordinator? All the research has shown in the 20-plus years, and there have been several models of research done on reviewing time banks and their sustainability issues. What's been proven is that the majority of time banks have failed in 3 years or less because they did not have a paid coordinator and because they haven't found a way to pay for that coordinator. So we call that finding your it. And the weatherization program here in Portland became a big it for us by having members be attracted to both earning and spending hours. It drew them in. They got more involved, and there's a lot of ancillary ways. Not only did they caulk and weather strip the houses and learn reskilling in trades, but they could then earn 40 hours, and we got a small grant to be able to pay for people who had spent 40 hours and were interested in becoming a credentialed, licensed, certified energy technician. We could pay for them with this grant to go to the state, take a 2-week course, and come out with a credential, which then led to employment. And 3 people were able to do that. That became very attractive to standard funders that we had approached for 10 years to give us money. And they all looked at time banking and said, it's kind of a nice thing, but as one of our friends would say, there's no crying baby on the poster. So anyway, finding the it is really important. And when we found the it of weatherization, we were then able to attract grants and donations from key places like the United Way, from our local bank, from small family foundations, from donations of labor, in-kind, and materials from individuals. Because it was a focal point. People said, oh, it's not just about exchanging general services in the community. It's actually, there are programs there. And then they gave us a second look and realized that in Portland, 1/3 of our exchanges, both giving and receiving, is for healthcare. Healthcare. So you can go to a traditional allopathic doctor, or you can have Reiki or craniosacral, massage, chiropractic, physical therapy, all done for time. So then they realized the value of that, and then they looked a little deeper, and people started joining because they could do small business development. People could come in and help others do things like create a business plan and landscape and paint your building. So having having a paid coordinator, having a visible presence in the community in some kind of office, even if it's 1 day a week, that people can go to and know that there'll be somebody there to answer their questions, seem really to be key foundational aspects of a program that survives. And on the next slide, what you'll see is the Time Dollar stores. And harking back to the founding organization in St. Louis, they actually created a store where their members can buy products for time. They did this by collecting expired date materials, by going to stores and asking for surpluses. And they first started stocking it with useful things that people on limited incomes needed, like toothpaste and toiletries. When we were there visiting last year, this woman opened this big store, which is a giant closet, and she said, guess what? We just got Colgate toothpaste, 4 tubes for $1 Time Dollar. And of course the line was out the door. So the value of that was incredible. There's now one in Madison, Wisconsin's Time Bank, and Kent, Ohio is opening a new one as well. So in terms of why this is good for nonprofits always are looking for money. They're always dealing with one grant being cut, and how do they fill the gap for that. And so the service delivery system that they have, the network that they have, means that they can use a lot of help for the biggest things and the littlest things. They might want big professional skills like grants writing or facilitating a board meeting or training for their staff, some specialized skills. But they also might want somebody who's a greeter there, just at the door, comfortably telling clients where they can bring their children for child care, where they can get a cup of coffee, where the bathroom is. They might want them for special events and fundraisers. There's a lot of people that are volunteers that help with that. But if you are earning hours by spending time helping a nonprofit save money for staff positions that have been cut, you're also part of supporting that organization. And then the members that contribute hours to the nonprofits can cash them back in for services they need. In sharing space together, it just makes sense financially and emotionally, and in peer support. You're sharing resources. If your service exchange is located in another social service agency or a nonprofit, you have an opportunity for collaborative grants, for brainstorming about ideas, for just peer support. For the clients, it's one-stop shopping. Instead of having to go to the senior center on one side of town and the service exchange on the other, they can make one stop. And the other thing we hear over and over is it's more opportunity to actually get to know clients who are / members / also your neighbors and friends. And it helps reduce the stigma. Somebody is not coming in just for food stamps or for a specific purpose. They might be coming in generally just to get to know other people and feel safe and feel like they belong and are part of a neighborhood. Businesses.
So what we've noticed in Portland, and we also noticed around the country on our walkabouts, is it's just a matter of time. It's a cliche in our movement, where organizations or businesses start to step forward and see opportunities in the time economy. On one level, it could be, you're starting a new business, but you're this network of the time bankers in the time economy that you can tap for potential new customers. We've heard in Kent, Ohio, we actually experienced they do tacos for time. I think it was Wednesday nights out there. So it's a regular cash-based business, but they're able to have this sort of new customer base that has time dollars to spend. So it's a marketing tool as well as a business tool, because they can take their time dollars that they've earned and use it for something that they might not be able to afford with restricted cash of their typical business budget. We see this inventory, to have a time sale of certain goods. It's after Christmas or whatnot. Big projects around painting and repairs, these are typically things that businesses or organizations, it's not part of that regular budget, but it's almost a time mob can get it done, can paint the building. So organizations and businesses, we call it gating the time, how much time dollars they receive, to take them in as a trickle and see if you can spend them. And if you can spend them, that encourages you to take in more. So to take small steps in the time economy so you don't get flooded or burnt out and whatnot. So it's really up to the imagination of the member or the organization or the business. And you can have two accounts. One is a business person or as a nonprofit or a church, and you can have your own account. So it's very flexible where you earn and spend your time dollars. But technology, people have gotten websites built and on time. It's really wherever you might spend cash is an opportunity, to spend time. What we're also noticing is in some communities, if the time banks can stay around long enough, and Linda touched on the sustainability issue, if they're around long enough, they start to think about economic development and incubating businesses and connecting to other organizations like the Buy Local movement. They just seem to be natural partners, and if the time bank is there long enough, the community itself can get creative, and the time bank coordinators can get creative, and they're starting to weave this community currency into other organizations.
And
the next, sorry, go ahead, Lynette.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to add to that this picture that you have of the coffee trader is from Montrose, Colorado. Terry and I went out there to do a training, and we stopped to get a cup of coffee before we went to the training. And when we were there, we were chatting up with the owner of the business, and he said that he was actually providing the coffee for free as a donation to the training. So I asked him if he knew what time banking was and about reciprocity, and he put his hands up very generously and said, no, that's okay. I just like to give it away. I give it away to all the nonprofits. And I kept asking him, but what do you need? Is there anything that people could give back to you? And he said, no, I don't need anything. Well, I looked beyond him. He was at a counter, and there was a stairway. At the bottom of the stairway were a lot of boxes, and it looked like kind of a mess. So I started laughing, and I said, well, what about cleaning your basement? And he goes, oh, my God, if somebody came and cleaned my basement, my whole world would be better. So I suggested if he joined the exchange, he could get people to clean his basement. And then we started brainstorming. What else do you need? Well, I could have the back room painted, and I could have help with my front yard and maybe fixing the sign. And then he got it. And he said, oh, my God, I didn't realize that this could go two ways. It could help me. And we said, yes, you provide your coffee to these members, and they can help you, and you have a stronger community. So we actually walked into the training with that story when we came in, and the coordinator was blown away because she had wanted to get the coffee trader to be a member of their exchange. And this is what we learn all the time, to keep asking people, well, what do you need? What do you need? And when they find out what they need, it's easier for them to go, oh, okay, so that's what I need, and this is what I can offer. It's just the opposite of where we might think of what do you want for you first, for the other person. It's what does the business need really seems to work.
So on the next slide, number 12, this concept of Commonwealth kind of emerged out of our walkabouts, meeting with different time banks, and the sister movements that we see. There's other local currencies and scripts. There's a buy local movement, Transition Town, Lions or local investment, the Grange halls, stuff sharing libraries. We're seeing all these things that are collaborative, local, resilient, sharing. We call it what's now be called the sharing economy. So this theme of what you have being your wealth, to turn to what you have as your source of wealth and the source of sharing. A concept we call the Commonwealth, where we see ourselves as rebuilding this Commonwealth. And we see that collaboration with other movements, which is natural for us on a local level. Linda's involved with her Resilient Hub, and now I'm living in Lake County, and I'm involved with Transition Town and the Buy Local movement. So there's two layers to this, we feel. The local, and the collaborative and the sharing of the resources that are there. And we also see this across the movements on a national level. So this is a great conversation to have across the country with Transition Town initiatives to begin to think about what the Time Bank movement might be able to offer back to transition towns. So, one of the things that's possible if you start to think about an abundant currency that we have, one where we create it mutually between members or between organizations or even organizations across the country. Can someone do a website for a transition town from one transition hub to the other, or one time bank to another transition hub? It's really as limited as our imagination. So we see, the internet tools and the internet software. There's car sharing software now. There's service exchange software like we have. There's stuff sharing software. So these tools, kind of technical tools on one level to allow us to share what we have that's abundant. And maybe underutilized or underappreciated, and someone else can appreciate it and utilize it. There's tremendous riches that we have if we think more abundantly. And our economy has us thinking, out of scarcity. It's interesting going back to the Great Depression. People still have the same set of skills and the same set of needs when the economy tells them that there's no money around. And people got creative, as we always do. So that's very interesting now. Ever since 2008, there's been a lot of different ways of thinking about our economy, and for sure we need this with our ecology. Some of these old ways are fatiguing, Mother Earth and fatiguing communities and individuals. So there's tremendous optimism. Lynn and I were struck by meeting different groups and the sort of creativity locally. We see. Sharing that, as we say, we don't need another movement. We need them to move together locally and nationally. Just share wildly if we have any opportunity to correct our economy, our ecology, our community before it's too late. Now is the time, and we have the skills and the people to do it. The neighborhood university is one of the last things on the slide there. This is something there are these themes that seem to be occurring, even though other groups might not be aware of it. It's almost like, so in St. Louis, they did a neighborhood university. It just evolved in 1983 or 82. That was like the next thing they did in their time economy, was to start to do a reskilling. We see that conversation, the transition movement is wonderful. But time banks, as they evolve, seem to start to talk about free schools or neighborhood universities, as does transition. So once again, the wealth that's just lying around that we can just share.
And that's actually a perfect segue into the next picture, which is a reclaiming of a Grange hall, which they affectionately called the Roadkill Café. But here was a building. Grange halls have a wonderful history in this country, and they are still all over the country. But sadly, many of them have torn down, fallen down, been sold because the Grange movement grew quieter. But they're coming back as we're becoming more sensitive to the land and farming and organic food and taking care of ourselves. We're also hungry for communities. So this picture is in East Sangerville, Maine, which is pretty much the middle of nowhere, just a few hundred people. And a cold winter day, Terry and I went up to do some training and visit people, and they invited us out to show us this Grange Hall, which had been reclaimed by the community. So volunteers, not in a time bank, not in a transition town, just town people decided originally that it was a shame to have this gorgeous building going to waste. So they got together to fix it up. And then as the time bank idea was happening, they said, well, gee, could we earn hours working on it? And they got schools involved. They got Grange people from the old days to come and tell stories. They replumbed it, rewired it. In fact, the day we were there, it was so cold, about 20 below zero. A plumber had been there for hours, and he unfroze the pipes, something like 15 minutes before the show went on, which you can see in the picture. And it was great. And they decided to return to the original values. So they were only serving coffee, tea, hot cider, and pie. That's what they served. And of course, all the people who brought the pie were looking to see which pies were eaten first, who had the best pie. It was packed, and every month they have another event there. And this is another example of how movements moving together. Now this has become a central place for ideas, for community meetings, for all kinds of things. The next slide is New Hope Time Exchange. And we want to just emphasize again some more about the ITs, about finding your IT for sustainability, and give you a few examples of some programs that are thriving, some time bank programs that are also bringing transition town components in and starting to get married here. Let's say they're dating, they're in courtship, and some of them are going to be married. New Hope Time Exchange is about 3 years old, and it has 200 members. It is in Providence, Rhode Island, and an integrated service network program for families in stress because of children in foster care or families with disabilities, all kinds of income work challenges, and a myriad of what we would call personal issues. The director there decided that for the same reason that Grace Hill Settlement House was birthed, which is that people that are not feeling skilled, not feeling loved, not feeling worthy, need more than ever to be recognized for what their skills and talents and good hearts are all about. She met with her families one at a time, went house to house, and talked to them and kept saying, I hear all the things that are going wrong, all the gaps, all the voids in your life, but I'm not hearing you tell me what your gifts are. What are you good at? And she kept working with them until they finally could come up with, well, I make great chocolate chip cookies, or I know how to sew this, or I'm actually a good painter. I know how to juggle. I can fix a car. She went on and on with them, in these personal interviews, and as they came in wheelchairs, on heavy medications, being driven by other people, she kept introducing the idea of exchanging services based on what they did well and how they would feel good about themselves. And New Hope now has over 200 members, and they are helping themselves and helping each other. So they get support from federal funded programs like respite care and lots of training and classes, but they also have members helping members just feel normal and feel good. They take each other to circuses, to different theater and shows, where they have a transportation pool. They're having potlucks where they eat together. And as one person said, I now feel normal in the world. I'm not just a person with a child who's very ill. I actually have a community again. That's their it. And because of that, because of this way this is growing, they're talking now about transition town projects that these people with other people in the community can work on together. And one of them is a couple that is building a greenhouse, all energy efficient greenhouse, and has needed help on their land, clearing the land, picking up refuse, bringing food and lemonade and cookies for the workers. And that is going to be one of their first projects that they're working on together. So you can see that you can come in from many doors and get there, which is why this is just such a cool way to be. The next one is another amazing example. It's called Partners in Care in Saverna Park, Maryland. It was founded 20 years ago this week by two sisters and another woman, and they wanted to help aging in place, not even knowing. They didn't know until yesterday. I actually called Barbara Houston and told her about Japan and about Takora, because it's the full circle, same story of how they started their program. But their it is that they took over a thrift store, which they renamed as a boutique. And the seniors who want to earn hours by working in the boutique. The boutique is a 501c3 nonprofit that can collect things like a Goodwill does. It can be furniture, clothing, jewelry, dishes, whatever. So individuals like you or I could go in there and donate those goods, get a tax write-off for them, and feel good about making that contribution. The members go in, work the store, clean things up, do the sales, and they earn hours. The cash that is earned then goes back to support the parent agency that has many other services like transportation, home repairs, putting up handicap accessibility, many, many good things. So here is a time bank as a program within a nonprofit agency to help seniors age in place. And it has boosted the morale. They have a woman who's 94 who's still working there. For 20 years they've had people coming in and out. It's an amazing example of members helping members, of having a social enterprise, and of being now more and more green as they're working on home repairs, healthy food, and programs like Lifeline to bring people to social events and to be feeling safe and supported and loved. A couple of really good examples.
So the next slide is the Access Agency in Connecticut, Wyndham, Connecticut. They're utilizing, basically they're starting a time bank, but they're also starting a program through their CAP agency where they're buying houses and renovating houses utilizing time dollars in part. And they're, to buy these houses, that's the cash economy, and they're hoping to sell these houses or rent these houses out for affordable housing. I'm not sure if they're going to do anything with the time economy as far as the rent, but they're definitely doing it in the renovation project.
The next slide is Montrose, Colorado, and this is where we're finding the blending. This is an example of, is it a service exchange? Is it a transition town beginning? Is it, are we mulling together here? Is it a permaculture group? Is it a resilient hub? What is it? Because there are all of these people that heard about all of these different programs, and one of them, who's pictured up in the corner here, walked by this little park, a city-owned park, every day and said, boy, that would make a really good garden. So she asked the town officials if they could plant some basic flowers and perhaps a little food there. And the town official said, okay, as long as you put up a disclaimer that, to wash the produce and the city isn't responsible for it. Well, she started attracting other people, and now it is a three-tiered, beautiful piece of visual art where food is grown, where different people come, plant, weed, and then pick the crops. And people will walk by and pick asparagus out of it or cherry tomatoes. And they water it, and it gets bigger every year. This is the third year in. The Time Bank now lays claim to this, and they're thinking of doing other projects like that around the community. Very much into the environment, organic food, and thinking of how can we beautify our town on different corners by having little gardens. You can see that if we go to the next slide, which is her backyard, with a member who was looking to earn some hours and wasn't sure what he could do. And he started to build a garden for her in her yard. And she just said, free reign, go pick what you want to do whatever you want to do. For flowers, redesign my yard. This is the before. We haven't got a picture of the after, but we hope we'll send it to you someday. It's another example of him not sure what his gifts were, and she's blown away by the redesign that he's making for her. Quite beautiful. And the next slide, number 19, is Tidewater Farm. And this is where I'm excited. I'm here in Portland, Maine. Terry's out in California. This is a farm that is part of a land trust. It's 100 years old. There were 8 acres of land that were carved out to be in this land trust for reuse in the community as a farm and educational center. It's managed by the owner of the land trust. And Cooperative Extension has been, which is operated through the university system, has created a garden there, which they use as an education teaching for master gardeners to do raised bed food. So the garden, the master gardeners learn how to do raised bed gardens. They grow food, and the food is then brought to soup kitchens and food pantries. So multiple uses there. There are also 2 other communities that are working there. There's a refugee resettlement community of mostly Africans and Somalians that are growing food. And then there's another nonprofit group called Cultivating Community that is learning about organic farming and permaculture, and they are growing food. So they now have half of the space is food production, and they also have bees. But this huge, magnificent barn and the farmhouse are waiting to be renovated. So we're pulling together a group, an alliance of people, including our local transition town, the Cooperative Extension, our local service exchange, the university students, some AmeriCorps Vista volunteers. We're talking to the food co-op, and we're talking to anybody else, basically, who wants to do really a barn raising. So we would raise money to renovate these buildings, turn the barn into an education center for more classes and more opportunities for people to meet. And the farmhouse upstairs would be available for a farm couple or individual to actually manage the farm, and downstairs would be common meeting space for groups like Transition Towns, Timebanks, others to come and talk. Portland Trails, which creates trails through the town, has now created trails that go from there to the ocean, which is just half a mile behind it. And so it's really literally they built the field and we are coming. And we just love it. So this really, for me, exemplifies an opportunity that has been sitting there, that as we all went out to see the food that was growing on the farm, we kept saying to each other, oh, you're in Transition Town? Oh, I'm in the Time Bank. Oh, I'm the Master Gardener. Oh, have you heard about the new food co-op? Are you part of the farmers market? And together we all looked at the barn and said, what can we do here, as one? And this is something to watch. So I'm very excited about what we'll unveil here over the next year.
So Lynn and I have kind of taken you around the country and a little bit going to Japan. We've even been around the world. And we're going to slow down and drop into one community on slide 20, and that community is Lake County, California, where I live now. And Lake County is a poor area in a conventional sense, but a wealthy area in terms of how the community connects with one another, and they've needed to for a long time because the economy the traditional economy doesn't meet their needs. But the community is, normally 6 degrees of separation. In this community, it's 2 degrees of separation, which I'm originally from New York. This is a culture shock for me, but a beautiful one. The area's unemployment rate is probably near to 20%. They reported at about 15. It's probably 20 to 25%. So the community is money poor but time rich. And so the Time Bank, and this Time Bank in Lake County actually came out of a transition work group. It was one of the sessions that they had on economy. A group formed called Thrive, and Thrive created the Time Bank of Lake County. And what's interesting now is the transition movement, and that you can't tell the difference between the folks in the Time Bank and the transition movement and some of the other community organizations I'm going to talk about briefly. And that's beautiful. The movements really do move together here. And transition, they grow at different paces. So transition kind of birthed the Time Bank, and the Time Bank for 2 years built members, slowly was building transactions. But February, something different happened. Something different happened in this community. On the next slide, these different organizations came out to a Time Bank training. We do 2 types of training in our world. One is the immersion training, where you go visit a Time Bank, kind of eat, sleep, and drink time banking in a successful time banking community. Or another training that we had, one was in Montrose that Linda was talking about, that community. And this one here in Lake County, where a fantastic community organizer got these groups into the room. I was putting this slide together, I was realizing since February how these groups have kind of connected through the time economy ever since this training in February. And transition, the radio station, it's just amazing that each of these groups are finding a way to use the time economy to get their needs met. So it's not only on a member level here now, it's on an organizational level. The next slide, the community co-ops. This, on the left side, you'll see the picture. There's Joanne, the leader of this food co-op, and they're assembling the food boxes, which now, so this is a cooperative where members, I think they pay about $20 for the box of food, which you see up in the middle. But now you can get a Timebank box for 4 time dollars. So the co-op is engaging more worker owners in the time economy, and they're exchanging the food boxes for time now as well. So we have a lot of good local grown stuff connected through this food co-op, and now some of the producers of this food locally are thinking about hiring workers and paying them in time or selling their food in time, and it's starting first at the food co-op. You'll see there's a bag of wheat there grown locally, and there's 2 different local scripts. One is a pig buck there from the Lake County, and the other one is from the Mendocino Time Bank to the north. And I got the bag of grain in exchange for connecting to the Mendocino Time Bank and sharing what we're doing down in Lake County. We know our local growers. There's this picture of a chicken there, and we've in the food co-op have eaten the eggs from that chicken. That's Loretta's chicken. So there's resilience now in local food resilience that's happening in networking, and they're utilizing the time economy. So Transition Lake County and the Time Bank, we have a picture there of the reskilling school. So in Time Banks, they might have called them neighborhood universities, free school, reskilling. And you look at the board there, there's all those different classes. This community, reskilling here, these are some of the pictures of that event. The professors that are teaching us are getting paid in time. Nathan, who's in the gray shirt in the upper left, is the photographer who took these pictures, and he was paid in time to do this. So the professors, the photographers, the people who brought food out, this is part of a beautiful place called Ancient Lake Gardens. So Transition and the Time Bank moving together here. The next slide, here's Nathan's photographs again, tell a story of Donovan, a local farmer, and he's recycled some of those boards there, assembled these garden boxes for 6 time dollars. On the next slide, we see this is a truly community currency here. Carol in the blue shirt, getting her time bank planter box, hanging out with Donovan, getting to know the goats there. He sells goat's milk for time dollars. He's one of the local producers of food that's now in the time economy. And on the last slide, we have Carol watering and growing. Those are plants also paid for, some of them in time dollars. And that's the backyard of where I live. And Carol's my landlord, technically, and I pay her in time dollars to live there and to work in this community. So Carol's the woman who brought that group together for the training. And the movement's moving together here in Lake County, just so inspiring and so alternative to what we're used to. So I'll let Linda wrap up.
And the wrap-up is the last picture, which is back to Grace Hill Settlement House where Terry and I visited. And on this day, we worked with the AmeriCorps Vista people planting plum trees in the yard. And on that trip, we realized our mantra, which is we don't need another movement. We need the movements to move together. And now we are excited about hearing your questions.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I noticed some people were needing to get off the call because some people have their hour. And so for those of you that have a burning question, press 1 on your keypad right away or comment. And I'll call on you in mic queue. And let's see who we get first here. Is Margaret Solstein will be first, then Gina and Kevin. So Margaret, go ahead.
Hi. I'm the coordinator for Tompkins Time Creators, which is located in Ithaca, New York. And one thing that we've been trying to find a solution to that I've been really excited to hear you talking about are how to incorporate people offering goods. So like services, like that's really straightforward. You know, you give the service and the time spent on that. And so I've been curious, and I'd like to hear you talk more about how to bring goods into and recording in the service, or recording that within the time bank, because I heard different things like a box of produce, for so many hours, 4 hours at one place, and then another thing, was so how, or like the time bank store, like how do you bring those goods in and then list a time value for that that's not connected to a U.S. dollar, because I know the big difference is with time banking versus barter is that the time can't be associated with a dollar amount.
Yeah, that's true. So here's the quick answer to that is that that's a tricky one. Portland, Maine actually has a 501c3 and a federal review that says that we can exchange goods for time, and the way we can do it is you cannot use the cash economy. You have to not say this was a $20 box of food. You have to think how much time did it take to package the food, put it in the box, clean the box. It's all based on the time currency. The other important point legally is that the administrator of the program, the coordinator, cannot set the value. It has to be between members. So you as a member could sell me a glass for half a time dollar. I can say, no, I'll pay you a quarter of a time dollar. But the deal happens between the members. So if you do it that way, it's member to member and it's based on the currency of time, you're okay. But it is something to be really careful about, and the places that have created time dollar stores are very cognizant of the fact that they could be challenged by the IRS for trading goods without a specific tax exemption that languages that. It's a big deal in discussion around the country. So, and I can talk to you more offline about that if you want to.
Okay, yeah, I'd be interested in doing that. Thank you very much for the answer and for offering this. This has been a great resource.
Cool.
Hi there. Our next one is Gina. Go ahead, Gina.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello.
Yes.
Can hear you.
My question is more basic about the kinds of bylaws and foundational things for TimeBank and accountability within the board to the membership. Where do you have any information that I could get on those kinds of things? Hello.
Sure. There's a lot of information about starting an exchange, and it's really, if you think of it in terms of running a nonprofit, you need a governance committee, you need leadership, you need to think about job descriptions and a budget, and all the things you would need to do with any other service exchange. There is a lot of information on our website, and you can find a lot of information if you just Google pretty much any time bank. Time banks around the country, we urge you to go through and look at what other people have said and done and what they've posted. And then we do provide all this, of course, in a really in-depth training. But think of it, the first step is to do some research.
Well, I have been trying to research typical bylaws and I've had people send me their articles of incorporation, which isn't the same.
Right.
So we're looking for some examples of typical bylaws.
Well, if you're going to become a 501c3 nonprofit and file with the IRS, then you would need articles of incorporation and bylaws. If you're going to be a program,
we already have the articles we're already incorporated. We've done that, but we're working on bylaws.
Oh, okay. Well, there are bylaws examples. You can send me an email, and I'll be happy to send you a copy.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Wonderful. Next is Kevin. Go ahead.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi. I was also wondering about the problem of converting time from service into goods, and I think the answer you gave is, I also appreciate everything you've been sharing, and that's a very interesting area also, how to deal with the tax challenge. And I'm wondering, considering that and also with that aside, what you would say about the advantage or disadvantage of doing the goods exchange with a time bank or time money rather than with local currency.
Well, Kevin, those are two different questions. Just to dovetail on what Linda was saying before, I mean, there's the IRS question, right? That's one thing in terms of legality and taxes and all that. The other thing is a question of fairness. And we always say that it's between two members that decide what feels right. So I'll give you the instance of the TimeBank box. That just felt right for the co-op to charge $4 time dollars. It felt fair to the members. It was just a conversation that happened. And once that happens, that's a story that other people share. But it's, to tally up all the components of the food box and how much time, you get into the whole economy and market questions, all fair ones, but we just go to the gut and say, does that feel right? So as far as using other scripts and other currencies, we think these are all valid ways to get our needs met. So the time economy and time banking is based on the principle of equality in hours. Other currencies, you can negotiate 4 hours to 1, that sort of thing. And typically the IRS views that as a taxable event. So there's no issue, pay taxes in that economy, the time economy, if it's based on equality. So far, it's considered neighbor-neighbor exchanges.
Thank you for that, Terry. And we have 6 more questions. So, and we have about 10 minutes, and we'll try to get to all of you folks. Teresa Brady, go ahead.
I just would like to know if this transcript, if there will be a transcript or recording available for people who missed this, so how we can learn more details about projects that we might want to insight.
Well, let me answer your first part. Yes, we will have a recording up probably within a week or 2 on our website, and so that will be available for others. And what was your second question?
Details about some of the projects in the PowerPoint that might be ones we want to imitate, things that you showed, like briefly, where we would get more details on that.
Linda or Terry?
Sure, you can send us an email, either Linda at hOurworld or Terry at hOurworld.org, and we're happy to share some information with you. We also really encourage you to think about getting a group of people together for an in-depth immersion training, because when we do the training, we go A to Z on this. We cover the legal, the insurance, the programmatic, how to raise funds, how do you define your IT so you can attract funders and members from the community, and we can replicate that. These are teasers to show you that there's a lot of cool things happening. There's a lot more things happening, and we really like to honor them by going all the way in. And in a 2-day training. So you can find more information about that as well. But be happy. We'd love to meet you and help you out.
Great. Thank you for that. Let me let people know who's sort of next in the queue. We have Len, Cynthia, and Sharon, and Jake. So Len, go ahead.
Hi all. This is Len from love the conversation and all the information. I had a couple of questions about moving the movements together. There are a number of other movements besides the ones that you mentioned. For example, I've worked a great deal with Everyday Democracy, which is a powerful organization, national, that assists whole communities, large and small, in community visioning and community dialogue to wrestle with difficult issues, racism and so on. They are interested in both the transition town and the time banking, but they at this point don't know much about it. They're located in East Hartford. That's their main office in Connecticut, and it would be great if one or both of you could come down and chat with them about how organizations like them can assist and be assisted by the time dollar and time banking and transition town and so on. That was one question. The other question is I've run up against some resistance from actual formally created cooperatives about working together with other, what I would think and you guys think are very compatible movements. I wonder if you've had any success with that. There's now, I don't know, maybe 6 to 10 regional cooperative institutions, all of them part of the Worker Co-op Federation.
Len, let's let them answer because we're running out of time. So over to Linda and Terry. Go ahead.
There.
Terry?
Terry, are you still there? I think we lost him. Hi, Len. Everyday Democracy, I don't know about them, but we will absolutely check it out and welcome you referring them to us. Terry, you back?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Len, I didn't get the second question. I'm sorry.
It was about worker-owned cooperatives.
Yeah. Terry, do you want to answer that?
Yes. Am I on? I wasn't sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. As far as worker cooperatives, I mean, we're schooled in growing up in competition, and that's the mind shift to get into cooperation, as you know, Len, with co-ops. So it's the same with the time economy. There's this mind shift that has to happen. It has to happen gradually. But we're willing to have the conversation of how co-ops can move together with TimeBanks at any time.
Great. We're going to hear from Cynthia, Sharon, Jake, and Maria, and then I think we're going to call it a wrap. And Cynthia, you're on.
Okay. Thank you. My question has already been asked. Hi, Linda and Terry. This is Cynthia from Montrose, Colorado.
Hi, Cynthia.
Hey, Cynthia.
Hey. I was just asking if we could get a copy of this because I would definitely like to share it with others. And so you've already answered that. So hello, and I'll turn you over to Jake, the next caller.
And Cynthia's picture was in there with the edible garden, so you're a movie star.
And come see me, like you said. You're more than welcome to come at any time.
Yay.
Wonderful. Sharon, go right ahead. Whoops. Sharon, I'm not able to give you the mic right now for some reason. There we go. Okay. Go ahead, Sharon.
Okay. I had 2 comments. One was that about the bylaws. Media Pennsylvania has bylaws that include transition and time bank, so they're worth looking at. And I have a question about what do you recommend about insurance? Do you have a particular recommendation?
For insurance?
For time banks.
Yeah, it depends what you want. There's several kinds of insurance. One would be basic liability for your office, directors and officers insurance, which you can usually get through United Way of America or through a nonprofit to cover your board. Say that again. Directors and officers insurance, commonly called D&O. If you talk to a nonprofit, they usually have that. And the third one is the CIMA, C-I-M-A. CIMA insurance is volunteer insurance that was specifically created for time banks around the country. It's with the Philadelphia Insurance Company. And if you have a time bank, you can talk to them about purchasing that. And that is a gap insurance to cover members for any accidents that might happen while they're actually doing exchanges. The first line of defense is your own insurance. So if you have a private insurance company and you sprain your ankle, whatever your deductible is what the CIMA will cover. Your insurance will pay for the big part, and then they will pay the small, but it's really worth it. So those are 3 kinds I recommend. And we would love to get a copy of the bylaws from media. If you would be willing to share them with us, that would mean a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. Wonderful. We're going to hear from Jake now. Go ahead, Jake.
Hi there, Jake Hansen here. I'm also in Montrose, Colorado. So I was the one in Cindy's backyard doing the gardening spiral.
Oh, yay!
Wow.
Yeah, it was kind of surprised to see that. It was a pleasant surprise. But Terry, you talked about, my question kind of centers around, it's also a philosophical one with scarcity and abundance ideas. So Terry, you talked about when breakdowns in the economy happen, that spurs new creativity and new thinking and ways to do things differently. And time banks and transition towns might be both examples of things that have kind of been spurred since the Great Recession. And so an ongoing conversation we've had here with the time bank in Montrose is around the practice of time banks basically spending more than they take in, the central time banking account, and effectively, going hundreds of hours into the negative. And I mean, there's different concerns about that around, whether it's like inflation and inflating other people's and devaluing the hours that other people are earning by doing work. But at the same time, I understand that time banking is intending to, kind of foster a new paradigm that's, outside of the debt-based economy and which creates excess scarcity. But at the same time, my question is, are there concerns in creating excess abundance in doing that? And because with a normal person using the time bank, they have to, they do work to earn their hours, and so they value those hours and they spend them creatively and efficiently, versus being able to, essentially create hours and spend them. You don't have that same limitation, which compels you to be creative in how you use the hours. Is that clear?
Yeah. I mean, as clear as you can be about the big hairy question.
Yeah,
that's a big one. Let's start here. That time banking you could begin a time community in the gift economy. Just there's an aspect of gift or volunteering here, and there's an aspect of the hard currency that gets our needs met. But the builders of the time economy, you guys in Montrose, you're starting this thing, this investment in. So tracking, do you gate it? Do you not reward the time bank builders with the time dollars, which is very typical? Do you only have time dollars created between actual trades? This is a decision that's made locally. But if we manage expectations, if you look at these things as gifts that you're giving away, this is one of the reasons why the IRS doesn't tax neighbor exchanges. It's because there is no contract. There is no value put on it. But every time you get your needs met, it's pretty valuable, whether that's child care or painting your house or whatnot. So we always manage these expectations and try to say we're building something very different. But what we notice on the flip side of this is that people donate back their time dollars in a way that they don't donate their cash. We call it the social capital fund. So people who have earned in excess of time dollars give it to the weatherization program in Portland. So there's really a big mind shift in this sort of community currency. But when we think about it in terms of the regular hard currency, it's a ways away. But when you find that your needs are met and things are happening that wouldn't be happening for lack of cash, so it's just tread gently on this one. This is a tricky one. And some people who want quid pro quo, they need that, they might be later entrees into this. But the people who build this sort of thing are willing to do it for free, gift it, and if they get something back, beautiful. So that's where it starts. And when you're a community like Portland, where 1,000 members and there's a bunch of, a third of the transactions are in healthcare, that's a real hard need that's being met in that community due to the time economy.
Thank you for that. And I think we have just two more questions, and then ask you both for some final comments. Here we go to Antoine. Go ahead.
Hi. I was just curious, since the time is not converted to a dollar amount, whether in the time bank process, it's difficult to attract people who have higher level skills, who might think that, my time versus someone else's time is not the same amount of time?
Yeah, that comes up all the time. That's a really common question. And it's a wonderful question, and it's the one I like the best because it gives us a chance to really go to the guiding principles about equality. So a good example is a doctor here, a medical doctor, that said that he did not see any value in doing it because he had all his education and his skills were worth more than someone else. Then had a situation in his family where he needed help at home and he needed some respite care. And so when he then needed to receive help, he realized that, oh my gosh, the time that the person is there taking care of his aging mother was valuable, it was equal to what he was providing for other people. It's like learning another language, moving in your brain from English to Spanish. And at first you're translating everything to Spanish, and then one day you realize out of your mouth is coming Spanish without the translation. That's what happens to people when they get out of the old system and they say, oh, wow, it is important that I get this service, so whatever it is, it's an hour. And that makes my service what I offer to somebody else, an equal hour. But yeah, you have to work with people on that. That's a barrier to begin with until they embrace everybody is equal. And when they get that, it flows.
Ooh, I love that. Gina, did you have another question?
No.
Okay, you might have inadvertently pressed a number on your keypad, so I think that's good for now then, Terry and Linda. Thank you so much. If you would like to give us some closing comments, recap where we can get more resources and when there's a time bank training and that sort of thing, that would be fantastic.
So I'll just say that you can check our website, which is www.hOurworld.org, and please make sure you say .org because there is a .com in Hawaii, which is a business that has nothing to do with time banking or transition towns. There's training information on there. There's a great guide that says first steps to starting an exchange. There are videos from PBS's Fixing the Future, several other interviews. There's a lot of good material. And it's also good to just Google time banking and check out other websites for information. So we welcome you. We would love to visit you on our next walkabout. We would love to do training. And if there's a group of people that want it in your community, if you get other communities together, that's the best way to do it because it becomes affordable that way. And we just love to visit you, and we love to do the training in the community so we can feel you, see you, and be inspired by you. So thanks.
Yeah, and
Terry.
everyone, we're pretty accessible by phone and by email. We appreciate everybody's time here today and the work that's going on in transition. We're in transition, all of us. We're basically rethinking the way we do economy, the way we do community, the way we do money. And, the time is now. The time is now. I think we think a lot of us, it's easy to be scared when we watch the news and the injustice of the way the economy is built and the sort of things that are happening to the environment. One of the things that I love about transition is it's a better story, and it's a hopeful one where we can just plant a tree and build community. And it's the same with time banking. We can just do something different. And it's very inspiring work. So just encourage you all in the work you're doing, and that, it's official. Movement's moving together. So thank you all.